If you're an apartment owner, an investor, someone looking to get started in real estate investing, and you're wondering, what is the process? How can I determine value for an income producing property or an apartment building? Hi, I'm Juan Huizar, president of Sage Real Estate, and today we're gonna show you our processes from start to finish on what our firm does to help determine value on an income producing property. So the very first thing about value, it's very subjective. If you get 5 appraisers out or 5 brokers who know what they're doing out, we're gonna come up with various degrees of value. So there's no one correct answer, but there is a correct process to determine that. And there's certain metrics that anyone who's in the game of investment property should be using. Now, why is it important to have an accurate property valuation on your property? Well, for one, if you're an apartment owner, you're gonna own the building for 20, 30 years in most cases, and you should know where the value is at. In a market that we're in today, we're having fluctuations, right? So what your property was worth last year, now it's gonna be certainly more. And when we're determining as an owner if we should continue owning, selling, or refinancing, we need to know the amount of equity and the return on equity. So super important because those figures will be changing every year. 2, if you're considering selling, well, if it's priced accurately, then you get multiple offers, the market competes, you the seller win, or if it's overpriced, the property expires, which we see a lot of, and no one's happy, you're upset because the job was not complete. Number 3, no investment property is the same. Okay, every property is gonna be different in square footage, different bedroom count, different bathroom count, the layout. Sometimes we have 4 different separate houses. Sometimes all the properties are stacked on top of each other. It's location, it's parking, the type of rents that you get from the property, the condition. There are multiple factors in why no one property is the same. And 4, if you're a buyer, it's important you know the process because let's face it, you don't want to overpay for a property and you want to make sure that the return on the investment is there so that you can make a wise decision on your investment. I have an extensive appraisal background. A lot of that had to do with working alongside Mark Milan, who's an MAI, that's a member of the Appraisal Institute. What's important to note is that that is the highest designation that a commercial appraiser can receive. It takes years and years for them to achieve this designation, and I had the opportunity to learn alongside him, and I got to assist on every type of report that he was doing, whether it was hospitals, golf courses, hotels, apartment buildings, houses, everything underneath the umbrella of commercial appraising. We also did a lot of expert witness cases where the reports that we were preparing were going to be used inside of a courtroom determining value between parties. And so I had a chance to learn from the best from the very beginning. So now that we have our own brokerage firm, we bring all that experience with us. We certainly use that experience to help our clients sell their properties. And today we're gonna teach you the process. We certainly cringe when one of our clients will call us and say, hey Juan, I know you sell 4-unit buildings, but I could just pull a value off of Zillow and get a Zestimate on my apartment building. That's the biggest no-no for anyone out there. If you have an investment property, an apartment building, an income producing property, no auto-generated value out there can properly do so. So Zillow, Redfin, none of those have the system in place to give you a value that you could certainly hang your hat on. So what ends up happening, they come up with a Zestimate that is either way too low, so all of a sudden you're discounting your building because you took this self-generated value, or it's way too high in your head. You have way more equity than you ever did. It's important that we don't pull a number off the internet based on the information that's out there, because when it comes to income producing properties, there are multiple factors that need to be taken into consideration to help determine that value accurately. Now, we're not trying to beat up on Zillow. If you own a house, that algorithm is good for a single family home because what they do is simply go off the sales comparison method, which is okay. Now, in the world of income producing property, in the world of apartment buildings, in the world of investments, we use the income approach where we're gonna use that to determine cap rate, gross rent multiplier, rents, etc. And that's simply a metric that is not being covered under Zillow as of right now. So for apartment owners, if you own an apartment building, I know that the one thing every person who's trying to market to you is offering you a free property valuation. You might be wondering, what really goes on? I don't know what our competition does. Maybe they sit in front of their computer, go onto the multiple listing service, pull up a quick report and send it to you. That's not what we do here. So our process is a 3-part approach. The first one is data gathering. The second would be what we call the market analysis. And then the third is the financial analysis. And we're gonna go through that process today. So the first thing that happens when one of our clients or one of our prospective clients wants to receive a property valuation, they go onto our website and they're gonna fill in a request form. And some of that information obviously is, we're gonna need the address of the building, the bedroom counts, the unit count, and the rents. That's the preliminary information that we're gonna gather on the property. From there, what we do is we pull a property profile on the property because it's important that we reflect the accurate square footage. Oftentimes, realtors will put a certain square footage, but when we look through the records, there's something else being reflected, which brings us to our next part. Along with the property profile, we also pull up building and reports on the property. We want to make sure that the bedroom count, bathroom count, everything is legal. We know in the city of Long Beach that may not always be the case, and so we're just taking those extra measures to make sure that we're properly evaluating the property. A few other items we need is a profit and loss statement on the current subject property, which is what we're going to be calling it from this point forward. So after we pull the records, we know the type of the building that we're going to be evaluating. We now go onto the MLS and we're going to look through all the comparable sales that are nearby. So proximity is always important, unit count certainly important, square footage is important. No one property is alike, and so we try to get properties that are similar. It's important that we know the area because in Long Beach, if you're north of 7th, that could be a certain value, south of 7th, Cherry, Redondo, Broadway, all those streets make a difference. And so we do our best job to try to keep the properties close, and we come up with a list of 7 or 12 properties. And then from there, we're gonna try to bring that down to the top 5 or 6 best comparables. Now, the next thing we do is we try to locate the best possible comparables for the property we're trying to appraise. And so hopefully we're in an area where there are recent sales that are similar to it. And so things that we're gonna be looking at is unit count. So if I'm appraising a 4-unit building, I would like to compare it to other 4-unit buildings. That's an important thing. I wanna look at income for the property. Income is the #1 determining factor for an income producing property. So the higher the income, the higher the value. We all know that. We wanna look at square footage. We wanna compare bedroom count, bathroom count, location, and no matter what city you're in, neighborhoods are going to shift. And here specifically in Long Beach, we know that if you're south of 7th, north of 7th, there's different values. And the reason being is that tenants will pay a little more to be south of 7th. They're driving up prices, they're paying for the lifestyle, etc. But we have this throughout all of Long Beach where we have streets like Cherry, Redondo, sections of North Long Beach, PCH. And so we have clients that will sometimes say, keep me in an area that's south of this, west of this, etc. And most cities are gonna have that. We're gonna gather all that information, have these comparables ready. And what we realize is at this point, there's a wide range. It's never black and white, that's what the property's worth. There's gonna be 12 different values and a level of confusion. How do you narrow down those values? In order for us to find comparable sales, there are a few different ways that we do so. The most commonly used is logging onto the multiple listing service. Realtors, agents, brokers have access to this. There are some other websites, CoStar and LoopNet. If the buildings are much, much larger, some of the better information might be there. And so we do a good job of checking everything out. And actually one other location, some properties sell off market. So they may not be in the MLS, they may not be in CoStar. And so we have good relationships with title companies that are gonna show us properties that were sold off market because we wanna make sure that we take a look at everything that has sold to help determine that value. Now that we're done with our data gathering portion of our analysis, part 2 is our market analysis. So this means we leave the office and we go out in the field and we're gonna drive by the subject property, all the comparables, so that we know exactly the comparables that we want to use. Because again, right at this point, we have anywhere between 6 to 12 comparables that we're going to be using, and we want to narrow that down to the top 5. Now, in order to do so, we need to actually leave the office, go out in the field, drive all the comparables so that we could best choose and narrow down the comps that will help come up with the right value for the property. So let's go. All right, so now, we narrowed down the comparables down to 10 properties. You don't need more than 10, you don't need 20, that's just too many to select. Realistically, once you narrow them down to the top 5, you're gonna get enough data from the market to determine value. So again, I don't need a very large sample. What we're gonna highlight right now is the top 5 that we're just gonna go check out, make notes, and compare that to our subject property, meaning the property that we're trying to assess. All right, so we're right in front of the subject property. The subject property, again, is the property that we're appraising. This is 4 units that are each 1 bedroom, 1 bath. In a perfect world, I would have other comparables that are all 4 units that are 1 bedroom, 1 bath. It's never a perfect situation, and so the next best thing to consider when I don't have a perfect bedroom, bathroom count, we look at square footage. We always want to check out the subject property first, so when I'm driving through the comparables, in my head, we could be keeping track of either are they better or inferior to the subject property to help find that right value. And I got permission from the landlord, and so I'm just taking a look from the outside, taking some quick measurements. I see some new air conditioners. I see that this specific unit, 2 out of the 4, has a little private patio area. I know that this is desirable. I know that when a unit has its private space, it's gonna rent for more. So these are all factors that I'm gonna consider when determining value for the property. Also, one thing that I wanted to know is that this property is all electric. There are 4 individual electric meters, meaning that the tenants are responsible for their electricity. And I'm just taking just an overall glance of its location, its condition, so that when I drive through all the comparables, I know how to best compare them. Now we're gonna move on and check out the comparable sales. This is the narrowed list of comparable sales where we have the subject property in the middle, and you can see how close the properties are. Proximity is important because that indicates neighborhood. It gives me a better indication of value. I do not want to choose a comparable that's too far from the subject because then I'm having to make too many adjustments. So we're going to be pulling up to our first comparable. Most of the properties that we're looking at, if not all of them, are tenant occupied. And so we want to be pretty careful and respect their space. Having a few people in a suit walk the building, it might be alarming to them. So certainly I don't want to do that. So oftentimes I just want to take a look from the street, because from the street I could tell if the building's been painted and any level of improvements that the property might have. So I don't always necessarily have to get out, but really what I'm looking for is the area, how does it compare to the subject property, the building, the condition, is there parking, is there new windows, again, new stucco. Those types of things do play a factor when I'm determining value. So the first comparable that we pulled right in front of, I mean, at quick glance, what I see is that there's lots of garages. So in the city of Long Beach, garages are premium. When a property comes with garages, the tenant's gonna pay more and obviously, help raise the income of the property. The subject property that we're appraising has 0 garages. So I need to factor in the fact of I'm comparing this property that has lots of garages to one that has none, right? But then that's where my experience comes into play. And again, there's no 2 properties are alike. And so there's always gonna be a difference, and there's going to be adjustments which an appraiser takes into consideration at all times. So what I could tell now is that this property, in my opinion, is superior. Not in its location, it's superior in its age, and that means that it's newer. There's parking, and it's just much, much larger in square footage. So I already know that this is going to be at the top of the market, and our subject property is nothing like this. And that's okay. I mean, that helps me determine value. When someone fills out a request form for a property valuation, I always have an idea on what the property's worth, especially if it's in Long Beach or San Pedro, where we sell the most amount of fourplexes. The importance of getting out of the office, driving the comparables is critically important, because it's not until you see the comparables in person that I really get the best idea of value. Because what you see through the internet or stuff that's sold, it almost doesn't do it justice until you walk the property, until you're in front of it and you see, aha, it is better, or you know what? It's not as good as I thought, or those photos were well taken, but the property is not in that good of condition. So super important that to do a proper valuation of a property, you got to be out and see the comps. Okay, so we're here at the second comparable property, and what I'm looking for is it better or worse than the property I'm appraising? Okay, so now that I'm standing in front of it, what I like that I think makes it better is it is a 4-unit building, but they're separate. Tenants will always pay more when they have their own, call it little house, or a property that doesn't share another wall. So our subject property, I know for a fact, shares walls, and this one doesn't. So that's already a big plus. This one has yard space, which is a huge plus, and it's got parking. So already at quick glance, it is superior to our property. That gives me another, it almost shuffles my subject property between the first 2 comps are better. We're not worth what those are worth in simple comparison. Now, of course, we're gonna look at the income it produces, because that is really the main metric, but just from condition, style, location, I can make a quick decision already on what I'm seeing. Okay, so now we're in front of the third comparable. It's nearby. So in terms of location, it's the same. I'm not gonna make an adjustment for it. This one has no parking, neither does the subject. So all in all, it makes sense. And the subject property is all 1 bedrooms. This one's all 1 bedrooms. When that works out, I love it because chances are I'm gonna put a lot of weight on this specific property because it's so similar to it. We're gonna drive around right now. I'm a little familiar with this property and I know that they have newer windows. It's got laundry that produces a good amount of income at the very top of the building. And not all the windows are new, but some of them have been improved. This one is a really good value indicator for the property we're appraising. Okay, so now we're standing in front of the fourth comparable. This property we know well. In fact, we got to sell this property over the summer. We have more intel on this one than any of the other comparables because we've been inside. We know the condition's superior. However, the location is inferior. Where the other property was in Alamitos Beach, this one here specifically is in East Village Art District. I can't explain the importance of working with a professional who works in the area. Someone who wouldn't know the area would consider these two neighborhoods the same because they're near the beach. Complete opposite. We're gonna have to make a big adjustment in location. However, I will make a big adjustment in terms of condition on this property, which I know might be superior. And again, this property is laid out better. Front house in the back, detached duplex with a home in the back. All those factors come into place. We'll consider all that when we're trying to determine value. Okay, so now we're in front of the fifth comparable. This is the last one that we're going to be looking at today. And what I like about this building, its location. We were on the other side of Junipero, which I would call the east side, so significantly better. This one's more Belmont Heights area versus Alamitos Beach. So I'll make an adjustment for that one. This property does have deferred maintenance, just hasn't been kept up, but it does have parking. So these are all the things that go on in my head when we are considering everything to assist with the valuation of the property. And so it's not simple. There's a lot of factors that come into place, and this is for every single subject property. And again, at the end of all this, what really comes down to is the amount of income that the property is producing or the potential of it. Okay, so now we're getting back into the office from the field. Again, it's super important that you get out of the office, you walk the subject property if the owner gives you permission, you check out the comparable sales, and all we're doing is looking to compare. What we do now is I start to narrow down those comparables now based on what I've seen. And I'm gonna narrow it down by the proximity and also the properties that are most similar to the property. So in this specific case, we've narrowed it down to 5 properties that we like after driving everything. And here's an important thing to note. You can't do a financial analysis without doing the market analysis because the outputs from the market analysis now become the inputs for my financial analysis, okay? So the cap rates, the gross rent multipliers, the price per doors, the price per square foot that we extract from the market get put straight into the financial analysis, which is actually becomes our custom formula here at Sage Real Estate is our 521 formula, which we do have a video out on that, which goes into greater detail. Today it's just a little bit of overview. So if you want to watch our video on how to analyze a property, click this link. But those are the metrics that we're going to use. Again, everything that we take from the market gets put into the financial analysis, and then we put this through our worksheet and we come up with a value more or less where we believe we could hang our hat on. It's important to note that ultimately this part of the financial analysis is not absolute, meaning I am going to get a range of values off of the benchmarks that we like to use, but ultimately it's my experience, my background as a CCIM, my education that really determines the value, and that takes time. I start with these metrics, but at the end of the day, again, it's my experience, is where the market's at, it's where the inventory's at, it's where the pool of buyers, the interest rates, all that comes into place. And of course, that comes with experience. And so if you're trying to learn from this, it's your first time or you're just getting started, I really recommend that you go with a real estate professional, someone who specializes in multifamily investment property. Here's what we look at next. Now that we've narrowed down the top best 5 comparables. Now the 5 is just a number that we've chosen that gives us enough data from the market that I could extract the figures that I'm looking for. Sometimes it might be less, sometimes it could be more. The first thing that's critically important is what is our income for our property and what is the income of the other properties? Because again, we're evaluating an income producing property, and it's important that we know where our rents stand compared to the other properties, because that's the number one determination is how much income from an annual perspective are you making. So on the screen, what you'll see is all the incomes for the subject property. Some are a little more, some are a little less, and that's always going to be the case. If they're all similar, that's great, because from an income perspective, I'd like that, but the reality is it's impossible to find buildings that all share the same income. They're going to be all over the board, and it's your job as the professional to determine that. Next, I'm going to go to, this is our worksheet that we've created in-house. It's similar to what an appraiser should be using when determining income property. We have all the properties laid out, comparable 1 through 5, and the subject property. We have days on market because that's important to us to see how long is it taking for a property to sell. We're going to look at the unit breakdown. We're looking at, does it have garages, income, cap rate. The first metric that we use that's part of our formula is price per unit. And in this case, what you're seeing here is the average price per unit in this area is $369,000. Please note, I'm not looking to find the average in all of my analysis. Why? Because the property that I'm evaluating might be better, might be worse than the average. So this just gives me one benchmark. I don't hang my hat on this one. Then we go through and we take the average cap rate for all the properties. Sometimes we need to do additional work because when other agents who sell properties, sometimes they don't fill in the income components into the MLS. At that point, we need to make our best subjective figures when determining those rents. And so that's a little, you need more experience to come up with a cap rate when a realtor does not put in the figures. And so in this case, based off what the market's given us, the average cap rate's 4.36. That is normal for the city of Long Beach. Again, that's an average. I will weight that out later. Next is gross rent multiplier. Again, this is market derived. When I'm talking to someone, whether it's an appraiser, it's a buyer, it's the seller, I always want to say this is what the market has given us, not this is what I'm telling you, or I think this is the gross rent multiplier, or I think this is the cap rate. This is what the market is showing us. This data is coming from them. Same with the price per square foot. So there we have 4 metrics, 4 different values. We could average out those values, but the last thing that we do here at our company is we weight the comparables. Some comparables were good, however, they were out of the area, so we want to, I guess, discredit them a little bit. Some comparables were literally next door or in that same area, the same block, and we want to give them more credit, so then we're going to weight the comparables out. And at the end, we're going to come up with a wide range of figures. We're going to have values from the sales comparison approach. We're going to have values from the income approach. It's my job now to figure out what value is going to help us most. What happens in my industry when I list a property, I get calls from other brokers and buyers, and their number one question is, how did you determine value? And if I do my job properly, I could say, I based it off cap rate. The cap rate's 4.36 in this area. Based the income we have, that's a great return for this type of property. Therefore, it's worth said value. So it's very important that I'm able to hang my hat off of one figure. Now, not all the figures are going to look great. Sometimes the sales comparison approach will give me this really high figure. Sometimes the income approach gives me a really low figure, okay? And it's up to me to figure out which figure do I believe I could sell most, which one is going to be accepted by the pool of buyers, and which one can we prove up value when it comes to meeting with an appraiser and kind of showing them what we've done on how we came up with value. So again, these are all figures that we come up with. I may not choose any of these figures. This gives me a benchmark, but then again, it's up to me, the professional, to figure out what I believe this property's worth. I'm only using this as an example, but just so you know, analyzing a property is not easy. You could tell that I have 8 different figures that have come up through our worksheet system. Now it's my job to take my experience, my background, what the market has given me to come up with the value that I believe the market would pay. Another metric that we use is a sensitivity analysis. What we know that the market's going to sell at various cap rates. They're not all the same. And so we want to see if we apply those various cap rates of that specific area, what are the values that we're gonna get? Same thing with the gross rent multiplier. Yes, we do have an average, but like I said before, I don't hang my hat on an average. Sometimes you can, if the property typically is the average, it is in average condition, but most cases we wanna make sure that we get the full picture. And so on this sheet here, you'll see our sensitivity analysis. We have our income. We have various gross rent multipliers ranging from like 13 times all the way to 17 times. And we have our cap rates. At different rates of return, what is a buyer willing to pay? Gives me a range, same price per square foot, and then we have proposed financing. So you could see that when we evaluate a property, yes, we spend a significant amount of time. Sometimes it could take a full half day or even a full day depending on where the property's at and the data that we're able to find in terms of comparable sales. By doing it the way that we do, we get a full picture on what we believe we're able to actually sell the property at, determine a value, so that ultimately our clients, the sellers, win. As you could tell, we put in a lot of effort. There's a lot of details, there's a lot of figures, a lot of analysis. And again, it comes down to my professional opinion, my subjective opinion on the property. Again, this is not black or white. We don't get a number from the computer and I go with it. That's not the way that I do my job. And so I've concluded that this 4-unit building in the area that it's in, it's much superior to the other comparable properties. It has air conditioning. It's terrific location, and this property here, I'm gonna suggest that it's worth $1.5 million, which is a little higher than the average price for a fourplex, but it's also superior in income and superior in location. So there you have it, our process on how we tackle a property valuation. As you could tell, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of details. There's a lot of subjectiveness to this, but we wanna make sure that we look at everything. The income is important, the property, the location, all that matters. There's no right way to do it. We certainly, again, pride ourselves in doing so. I hope you learned something today. If you have any questions, comment below, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time.